EA Games.
Fuck up everything. Way back in 2004, a small group of modders, Frank DeLise, Brian Holinka, and Tim Brophy, created a mod for Battlefield 1942 called Desert Combat. A widely acclaimed mod represented the Gulf War and brought players from a World War II setting to a modern one. Called Trauma Studios, they were bought by DICE to help make a new game. A game that at the time none of us thought would be the last true Battlefield game.
Welcome to duty.
Now, all of you new players who switched from consoles to PC back in 2011 and 12 and started with Battlefield 3, don't get me wrong, I had a fair bit of fun with the game myself. But the whole time I couldn't escape a feeling that a lot was missing, that the series were not as fun as they once were, and that they were in many ways dumbed down. I will get back to this point later in the video, but let's go back to what EA and DICE did after they hired a studio and released Battlefield 2. Well, they did exactly what you would expect. They shut them down. Of course, the game sold very well and is played to this day by community-run servers. GameSpy shutdown meant an official end to Battlefield 2 servers, so we, the community, made our own, called Revive. EA shut this down too. However, that did not stop us from playing one of our favorite games, and now a service similar to Revive called Battlefield 2 Hub exists, on which Battlefield 2 can still be played. This was not the first or the last time EA has shut down a studio. They also shut down Westwood, responsible for Command & Conquer and Red Alert titles, which I liked a lot back in the day. Mythic Entertainment, Pandemic Studios, which developed Star Wars Battlefront 2 back in 2005. A Battlefront title that hasn't been surpassed since, with the modern iterations being a very shameful representation of what Battlefront used to be. They also shut down Visceral Game Studio, responsible for Dead Space series, Godfather, Simpsons, Army of Two, and unfortunately somehow they also made Battlefield Hardline, which was a bad joke on DICE's part that everybody forgot about by now. These were not the only studios that were shut down, there are way more, but I urge you, if you are a developer and EA or DICE are trying to buy you, chances are you'll be dumped after a while, or that your creative freedoms are going to be seriously limited. After the recent fiascos, most of you are familiar with the sad choices EA and DICE have made until now. There are many articles written on the topic, covering most, but not all of them, so I won't go through this anymore. Now, it's time to see which features has Battlefield franchise lost, and why has the gameplay been dumped down. I'm going to list a quote-unquote a couple of features that Battlefield has lost throughout the years. Local area network and online private server hosting that anybody can do from their computer. You can, for example, do that in Arma 3 right now. A detailed and useful commander mode. 6-man squads. A comma rows that had a purpose and teammates that paid attention to the commands that were issued. Map markers, skill and sense-based gameplay, proper server-side netcode. Planes that had the ability to drop bombs and you had to land on an airfield in order to repair and rearm them since vehicles had limited ammo. 7 different soldier classes instead of only 4. Faction-specific weapons. Proper military uniforms instead of dubstep mercenary uniforms that look almost the same for every faction. Convincing and localized military voiceovers instead of cheesy Hollywood one-liners. Teamwork that was encouraged. Medics that were useful since there was no health regeneration. A progression system that was actually rewarding and took time to accomplish. Back then, you couldn't buy your way through these with microtransaction and fucking loot boxes. Memorable loading screen music dependent on the country in which the battle is being fought, that you would remember for years. One of the most important ones for me, co-op and offline battles with bots. I can't even begin to explain how much fun these were, when you could just jump on a map that no one plays with your buddy, put a number of bots on it, and just cause mayhem, capture flags, or do whatever you wanted to do. Battlefield 2 also had more than just 2 or 3 factions. With its expansion Special Forces, in total it had 7 factions. Battlefield also lost a server browser that was inside the game itself instead of a web browser, and back then you also didn't need Origin to run the game. All these and many more have been lost to EA's corporate greed and reasons I will come to later in this video. It's a business, I understand, but they should also understand when we stop buying their games and they stop being a business. In the words of our great and wise Todd Howard, we'll stop releasing it when you stop buying it. I did not mention the most important thing by far, at least in my opinion, that the series has lost throughout the years. That would be modding tools. You know, back in 2011, Battlefield 3 executive producer Patrick Bach said in an interview that modding is a declining trend. Now, we can go right ahead and list these titles: Counter-Strike, PUBG, Dota 2, Team Fortress, Red Orchestra, The Stanley Parable, Squad, Killing Floor, DayZ, Insurgency, Chivalry, and many more. And then we can ask ourselves, has the modding in any way, shape, or form contributed to the very existence of these titles? Spoiler alert, yes, of course it has. These games were themselves once mods, or they were influenced by them. It's safe to say that modding tools give longevity to the games that have them, such as Project Reality for Battlefield 2, which is still being played, all the countless Stalker mods that are still being made to this day, and many others. They all serve as a testament that not only has Patrick Bach been wrong, but that not having mod tools in your games will leave many of the said games dead after a short period of time, forcing the consumers to buy the next iteration immediately, therefore filling EA's pockets. As if that wasn't enough, EA and DICE want you to buy their DLCs, and who the hell would buy them if people could make their own content? Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, Arma, and so on. They're all being sold and will continue to be sold in the future precisely because modding gives people from every walk of life the ability to do what they want and customize games to their heart's content. You know all the craze with the dinosaurs, spaceships, and Star Wars and medieval total conversions? That would all be possible with mod tools. Even the audacity to force their version of history down our throats by adding disabled women to front lines of World War II wouldn't be such a big deal if we could just simply remove them. The intrusive, dubstep, flashing HUD, points flying all over the goddamn screen like it's a fucking MMO could also be fixed by the community. Revisited maps or entirely brand new ones with 128 player servers could also happen, as they did in Battlefield games that did have mod tools. I played Project Reality with 128 players and it was a goddamn blast, and I wish for modern gamers to have those kinds of memories too. Look, even if you consider yourself a social justice warrior, you should be in favor of mod tools. The reason for that is, well, for example, you could remove all the white males from the game. You could add flying pink ponies, you could add non-binary gender aircraft and make them fight each other. You could also model in communists and the Eastern Front and put women in front lines because communists actually did that in the name of equality. With mod tools, everybody wins. Now, joking aside, I should also mention that mod tools for Battlefield 3 kind of already exist, but they were made by the community and it took a very long time. They should be released soon, at least that's what their website says. You can follow a link in the description if you want to know more. There's a Discord link as well. Maybe you already heard about it. It's called Venice Unleashed, and it goes to show how necessary mod tools really are and how much the community wants them. I've also spent some time thinking about the reasons behind the constant dumbing down of games in the past 10 years. The console market is not the only thing to blame. It is a factor, but still. Somehow, at least with DICE, political propaganda plays a role. They are, after all, based in Sweden, and Stockholm Syndrome is a thing. So some of their game design decisions make sense to the politically informed. But I'm afraid there are a few more problems related to the entire gaming world. Back in the days, studios make games that took themselves seriously. Developers were not afraid to experiment and expand features instead of removing them, like they do now. Back in the late 90s and early to mid 2000s, our generation was not questioning the maturity of those games. I might not be the best person to explain it, but the way I see it, the way publishers and developers treat kids these days is appalling. They consider them weak, frail, unable to face actual history and reality we'll live in. This does the kids a huge disservice. When did they stop making games that were fun learning experiences where you'd actually learn something through the tragedy of a digital representation of those times? DICE apparently has their own take on the Second World War, mind you, and their made-up version of the World War II is absolutely nothing compared to all the real people that fought in that war, whose stories are way more interesting than what DICE can come up with. Sometimes reality is stranger and more interesting than fiction. You could also make a case that YouTubers are to blame. Those who are endorsed by EA and who for a number of years now have been making borderline autistic videos hyping every release never addressing any issues whatsoever. And we all know who these YouTubers are. I won't mention any names, but in my opinion, they contributed to this whole thing and got rich in the process. I watched E3 this year and almost fell out of my chair when people applauded them for not having loot boxes in Battlefield 5. I asked myself, is this really where we are at this point in time? Is that really worthy of applause? I'll tell you one thing worthy of applause.
It's Royale.
No, not really. I don't think a lot of people asked for this. I think this is just something that they had an idea and they're like, okay, you know, it's a quick get-rich-quick scheme designed around the already existing hype surrounding Royale. Besides, it would have been made by someone in the first few hours of mod tools being released anyway. Okay, and we almost reached the end, almost. My final opinion on this whole thing is basically, if EA and DICE want public opinion to shift in their favor and actually do something good for the community and long-term success of the series and therefore the company, it is my belief that robust mod tools are the only thing that would accomplish that, because every move they've made so far has been a terrible one, both for the community and themselves. This would enable everyone to look past the absolutely idiotic game design choices made by DICE and EA and let people design and create what they want, possibly creating even new game modes that would attract more players that may not even be interested in Battlefield franchise to begin with. Another thing I would suggest is for them to ditch the campaign story mode entirely and instead focus on adding bots and co-op to all the maps and ability for players to create servers and customize their playstyle. Another suggestion I have, and this is something a lot of people would disagree with me on, it would be the progression system. It should either be removed or be very minimal. The main difference between what Battlefield used to be versus what it is now is that gameplay, and I repeat this, gameplay was in itself rewarding and the main reason you would play the game, rather than the progression system with its unlocks and skins, which is only there to substitute a lackluster gameplay. All you have to do to make this happen, or at least to try to make this happen, is spread awareness. Share this video if you agree with it, or even if you disagree, simply for the sake of this discussion. You can share it on Reddit, wherever you want. You can also help by canceling your pre-orders and simply not buying their games and contributing to the issue further until EA and DICE come to their senses. And I mean, voting with your wallet is the best thing you can do for this entire thing. You can instead buy other games like Red Orchestra, Postscriptum, and Hell Let Loose. And by doing that, not only do you take money away from EA, you also support developers that try to make a proper World War II game instead of a joke. And we finally reach the end of this video. I could have easily made this 3 times longer and cover way more things, but I just didn't have the time, and nobody would probably watch it. If you reached this point, I applaud you for your attention span, because I'm not the most alluring speaker out there. Speech impediment is a thing. And I thank you for watching. I don't normally make videos like these, but I see that they might become a necessity to repair what was broken and retrieve what was lost. I would appreciate if you subscribe, but I do warn you, I also make hardware and build videos, sometimes covering daily deals and stuff like that. So yeah, just a heads up. Liking the video and sharing it around would be a great help. And thanks for being here and watching the video. I appreciate it very much, and I'll see you guys next time.